Hey there, this is Matt with Ultraviolet Networks, and today we're going to go ahead and go over the FortiGate SSL VPN with Microsoft Azure SAML two-factor authentication, basically with Azure AD. This video comes by popular demand as many folks have asked questions regarding a blog article I wrote in regards to this topic, and I was hoping that a video implementation guide would help clarify some of those things, and it will allow us to talk about certain intricacies of the configuration. Assumptions for this video is you're using FortiOS version 6.4.0 or above. I will be using 6.4.4. FortiClient version 6.4 or 6.4 or above, 6.4.2 for Mac OS. If you currently upgraded to 6.4.3, that's okay too. Authentication realms are enabled for SSL VPN, and I'm using Azure AD Premium P1. There's some debate as to whether or not the base subscription will work. Most of the target audience here, I'm sure, either has some sort of Office 365 with Azure Premium or some sort of Microsoft 365 E3 or E5 licensing, which includes Premium. I think it's even Premium P2. I'm no expert in Microsoft licensing, but at any rate, this should work for those organizations seeking to do this. One last thing I did not note in the assumptions, but it is a recommendation, and I'll probably cover it a little bit further in the video, is that I am using a valid, a publicly signed certificate by a public certification authority, so something you buy from GoDaddy, VeriSign, whatnot. That's a requirement for the scope of this video. It reduces the number of errors that your users may be getting prompted with, and it also improves security. All right, well, on that note, I'll see you. All right, here is a lab PC right now. As you can see, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a command prompt, and I'm going to do ping 10.221.0.5. And as you can see, I can't get to anything. This is my Azure LAN. No, not 0, excuse me. 4.7. 4.7, and we'll even look at the FortiGate to confirm that. So that's my Azure LAN. I'm currently on a different subnet. And if we look at my FortiGate here in Azure, you'll see the network interfaces. The WAN is 0.4 and the LAN is 47.4.221. Obviously, this is a VM in Azure. For those of you who may not have had any Azure or cloud exposure, the way this works is, even though there's a public IP that this resolves to, Azure is handling the NAT for us. So my IP on the WAN side of the FortiGate is actually a private RFC 1918 space IP address. So we're going to go ahead and start on the Azure side of things. As you can see, I'm using Azure AD Premium P1. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go over here and create an enterprise application. Prior to the folks at Fortinet actually creating this template, you would have had to create this manually. Azure SSL. Fortunately, we don't have to worry about that anymore. And really, the major difference here is that they actually gave us some recommendations on how we should format our URIs that we'll be using for SAML. So we'll go ahead and assign users. We're going to go ahead and start with me. So we'll add myself, select, assign. Now you will probably want to assign some groups. Be advised that you're probably not going to be able to assign any sort of AD sync groups. So what you want to do is create a group in Azure AD and then add the AD sync group to that. All right, and now once we've assigned the users and groups, we'll go to our SAML or try a single sign-on method. Currently, it's disabled by default. We'll go ahead and turn this on with SAML. The basic configuration is specific to the FortiGate, so all these URIs will point back to the FortiGate. And what we'll do here is, like I said, the folks over at Fortinet had already made this for us. So it's we'll go ahead and do SSO. I've already pre-created the DNS records for this. SSO.ultraviolet.network. Remote SAML metadata. And we'll set that as the default. The reply URL, which is, you may hear it called the ACS URL. This is essentially the URL we are going to use to hand back the SAML yes or no back to the FortiGate. So typically, like I said, they'll provide you with what they're expecting here. So we'll go with this SSO.ultraviolet.network remote SAML login. Okay. And then the sign-on URL, this is what you would typically see if you were to actually browse to SSO.ultraviolet.network without SAML authentication. You'll get redirected to this. So chances are it's going to be this. It's not chances are, this is what it's going to be. SSO.ultraviolet.network remote login. And then last but not least, the logout URL, which will be https://ssO.ultraviolet.network/remote SAML log out. Now, something to note about this is I commonly use 443 for my SSL VPN. And the reason I do this is because port 80 and port 443 are almost allowed from anywhere. If you specify a different port for SSL VPN, you are going to want to make sure that you specify the port in each of these. Also note that if a particular location is not allowing port 8443 or 10443 or whatever port you're using for SSL VPN on their guest network or wherever you're working from, you might have trouble connecting. This is also another reason why I use port 443. All right, so we're going to save this and we're going to be prompted to test our access. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get very far with this right now because we have not yet configured the rest of the attributes or the rest of the settings that we need to configure. We've done nothing on FortiGate side either. So we'll go ahead and add a new claim. And the reason we add this is so that we can actually provide an attribute down to the FortiGate that highlights who this user is. So this is saying, hey, when you pass the person who's authenticating data down, the user principal name qualifies as the username. And you'll see where we'll configure this here in a moment. So we're going to go ahead and save that. I'll go back to SAML-based sign-on. Step 3 is the SAML signing certificate. I recommend you download a copy. So we're going to save this copy. All right, cool. And then make note of these, whether you put them on Notepad or just leave this page open, that's fine. So I'm going to move on to the conditional access. However, I'll end up going back to the SAML configuration to copy the URLs over. So ssl.vpn.2fa, and then the users and groups. All users, basically any users provisioned to this application. And then last but not least, we're going to grant access, but we're going to require multi-factor authentication. This is what's going to prompt the user on their Microsoft Authenticator app to either allow or deny the access request. Okay, so we've created that there. So we'll go back to single sign-on and we'll leave this up here. And now we're ready to actually move over to the FortiGate and start configuring. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the command line. And before I even do that, actually, what we need to do is import this certificate that we downloaded. And we're going to import it as a remote certificate. And we're going to upload it. And we go down to downloads, and it's this. So you'll see it gets named remote_cert1. Well, this is not very meaningful for me, so I like to name things meaningful with meaningful names. So we'll go to config, VPN, certificate, remote, rename, remote cert1 to MS Azure Saml cert. And as you can see, now if I do show VPN cert remote, you'll see that it got renamed to this value. Great, now we'll go into configuring Saml. So you configure Saml very much how you configure any other authentication mechanism. In this case, it's just not visible by the GUI. So we're gonna go ahead and edit Azure AD SSO. It doesn't really matter what the name is, only that you assign a name there. First thing I'm going to do is set cert. This is the cert I'm going to use, and this is the cert, the publicly trusted cert that I'm using. And if you'll notice, it's showing here. So, and then we're gonna go set. This is FortiGate specific entity ID, and then we'll open this up. Copy this over, and the reason I'm copying this is because I don't want to make any typing mistakes. Set entity ID, and I perhaps should just do this. Grab it. There we go. Set single sign-on URL. Grab this. Set single logout URL. Go ahead and grab this. Okay, so now if I do a show real quick, this is what we have configured so far. We still need to configure the Microsoft setting. So now what I'll do is I'll go ahead, set IDP cert, MS Azure cert, set IDP entity ID, and this is where we come over here and why I left this page open, because I'm going to grab this Azure AD identifier. This is our entity ID. Fix that there. In fact, go back here. Do that. It doesn't matter if you put the quotes in. It's a preference of mine. If you have spaces in there, you're going to want to put quotes in, but being that these are URIs, you're probably not going to run into that very much. Set IDP single sign-on URL, and we'll go over here, and this will be our login URL, which is this right here. Open quote, paste it. Set IDP single logout URL. We'll open the quote now, and we'll come down here. Change that. All right. So now we've got this. However, remember we created that one claim for username. So now when Azure passes the username attribute here, FortiGate is going to know that the username or that attribute he's passing is the username. And now I'll do a show. It's just something I like to do in the event that I forget a required parameter. I can just copy and paste and save myself the work. So now we'll do next. Hey, look, no errors, we're good. So I'll type end. And now we're going to create a user group and put all the Saml users into it. So this is what we'll use in our policies as well as for the portal mapping. Edit. Azure AD users, set member, Azure AD SSO, and okay. So now that we've created the group, we're going to go create Ssl Vpn. I just wanted to point out that even though this is running on an Azure FortiGate, that's not a requirement here. This can run on any model FortiGate as long as it supports 6.4 and above. So with this being said, I'm going to go ahead. This is a brand new FortiGate. I did it here for the sole purpose of just showing you what it looks like to be set up fresh. So the first thing we'll do, as you can see, I'm missing my realm here. So, and this is going to be important. So I'll go to System, not FortiGuard, Feature Visibility, and we'll enable the Ssl Vpn Realms. Now, if I were to go into VPN and VPN Realms here, I could create the realm. So as this loads. And we'll call it SSO. Now, I specified my my DNS entry here as sso.ultraviolet.network, and this is expecting cloud-gate.ultraviolet.network/SSO. How can I get the FortiGate to use sso.ultraviolet.network? Well, we can go to the command line, config VPN SSL web realm, edit SSO, and you can do set virtual host sso.ultraviolet.network. And okay, so minimize that, and we'll go back here. And as you can see, the virtual host now popped up, and it's even exposed in the UI. So this is how I intend to have my users access Ssl VPN. Now, call me crazy. I'm just going to go in here and edit this. This is the blue theme. I'm going to change it to neutrino. Save. Okay. And I mean, settings. As you can see now, this is a brand new Ssl VPN deployment, so none of this has been configured before. I'm going to have to go change the admin port setting on the FortiGate before I can proceed with this, and this is going to disconnect. Not to worry though. As you can see, we're back up momentarily. And we'll go back to VPN. And now we at least won't have that conflict. That'll take care of one message. I'm going to listen on the WAN interface. And then I'm going to limit access to specific hosts. In this case, it's going to be a geographical host. So geography, USA, and we're going to go here in the United States. This is a good idea if you know that people aren't going to be VPNing in from countries that may be considered hostile to your business. So I tend to try to limit where this can come in from. You can say the idle logout's inactive for 5 minutes, 300 seconds. Also, it's very important that you change this to a trusted certificate, because if I go back, you're using a default built-in certificate. So this sets you up for a man in the middle. You may have seen an article saying that FortiGate FortiGates are vulnerable. You know, it's not. This isn't a Fortinet issue. This is the danger of using self-signed certificates. So this is why you want to use signed certificates. Okay. For the scope of this video, I'm using the built-in range. I would imagine that most of you, if not all of you, will need more than 10 IP addresses for remote users, and that you would specify your custom IP range. The DNS server, I would imagine you would also specify your own DNS servers. I'm going to leave that as default. I'll apply these settings right now. Oh, yeah, I have to set this first. So for now, all other users get web access. They do not get tunnel access. Now I'm going to come here and I'm going to create a mapping to our Azure AD users. and I'm going to assign them the SSO realm, and then the portal they'll get is full access. But I still need to go make a change in the portal because by default, this portal allows split tunneling. I don't like split tunneling. If you're connecting remotely, I want to make sure that everything you're doing is being inspected and that doesn't open us up to any sort of additional risk. There's a lot of debate around this. This is just my personal philosophy, and if you happen to have something that works best for you, by all means. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying this is what works for me. So we still have this nag here. So it's saying we don't have any SSL VPN policies, and there's a reason for that. So if we did https://sso.ultraviolet.network, the page will not load. No matter what we do, it will not load because we don't have any policies. The FortiGate's smart enough to say, hey, wait a minute, I don't have any SSL VPN policies whatsoever. Why am I even going to expose this web page? So what we need to do is go create a policy. And what we can do, so what we need to do is create a policy. And we can say SSL VPN to LAN. And the outgoing interface is going to be port 2. Source is going to be the tunnel range and the user group, Azure AD guests, or I'm sorry, Azure AD users. The destination is going to be the ultraviolet Azure LAN. So if you look at this, remember we tried pinging that earlier and nothing. The service is going to be all in this case. However, you may want to figure out what your required ports are and only enable those. For security profiles, I almost always enable antivirus and IPS. This is where most lateral movement attacks occur from. For NAT, I'm disabling NAT. Inspection mode is really up to you whether you want to do flow-based or proxy-based. I'm doing flow-based for the sake of this video. Each has its advantages, and it's beyond the scope of this video. Last but not least, if you're connecting in remotely, I want to make sure I see all of everything you do. In the event of an attack, we're going to need to know what exactly took place. Okay, so we have a policy there. This will redirect me back to the SSL VPN configuration. But since I disabled split tunneling, I want to make sure that there's a policy that allows users to go out to the internet too. So what we can do is we can copy, paste below, and we'll say ssl.vpn.to inet, right? And we'll add a web filtering profile here. For now, we'll just do the default. You can always customize these to however you want. And we'll apply that, and then we'll change the port, the egress port to port 1. So this is going to allow them to get to the internet. Oh, one more thing, we need to enable NAT on this guy. So, all right, and no, wrong policy. Oh no, this is fine. No, this is not fine. Wrong policy. I need to enable that here. Apply. Set status enable. Okay, so now we have our policies and we should be ready to test. Typically, I like to test access from the web first, and as you can see, I've been redirected to Microsoft. So we'll go. I'll put my information in. Then I need to confirm the correct number. Yes. Perfect. So I'm in. At this point, we can go ahead and test tunnel mode as well. So I'll go here, And the way this is configured is when you go here, when you go to add a connection, you just make sure you check this box here. And then as long as this is all configured correctly, you should be good to go. Save, and then this is all you get, and it should redirect you to Microsoft. So before we do this, I'll show you we cannot ping. We'll never be able to ping that anyway. 47.5, we can't ping that. So now let's get logged in before it times out. So once we get on, now we're able to ping it, and also for good measure, I'll never be able to 47. Choices. Yeah, this. And there we are. We're logged into the server on Azure. However, I think the display is huge, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect to the second session here, and we're going to change that and do 10.221.47.5. Yes. Okay. And see, now it's correct. And yeah, we're logged into Azure. So that's really the nuts and bolts of it. So you just want to remember that you're going to configure your Azure side first. You'll assign your users, configure the Saml settings as we covered, configure conditional access if you're going to require it. You don't need conditional access. However, if you want to make two-factor mandatory, you will need to configure conditional access. And then you'll configure your FortiGate. Start by configuring config user SAML, then and specify those parameters. Remember that the links or the URIs have to match exactly between Microsoft Azure and the config. Then we want to configure the user group and add the SAML users into that group, and then configure your Ssl VPN. Enable realms if you're going to use them. I happen to use them; they're not a requirement. And last but not least, configure policy. If there's anything else or any other questions you have, feel free to leave a comment below. I will try to respond to them in a timely manner. I do appreciate your viewership, and hopefully this helps some of you who have run into some issues. Until next time, thank you.